Hillary Clinton on gun control. Secretary of State, previously Democratic Senator, NY. Gun epidemic is leading cause of death of young black men. We have to bring communities together in order to begin working on criminal justice reform as a mutual goal. And we've got to get guns out of the hands of people who should not have them. The gun epidemic is the leading cause of death of young African American men. We have to make sure the police respect the communities and the communities respect them. And we have to tackle the plague of gun violence, which is a big contributor to a lot of the problems that we're seeing today. Source: First 2016 Presidential Debate at Hofstra University, September 26, 2016. 2008, fondly recalled being taught to shoot by grandfather. The New York Daily News published a cover story headlined, "Bernie's Sandy Hook Shame." It accused Sanders of callously defending gun manufacturers against a lawsuit brought by relatives of the victims of the Sandy Hook school shooting. This is based partly on Hillary Clinton's attacks, which include that Sanders supports the NRA. However, in 2008, when Clinton ran against Obama, she sent out mailers attacking Obama's position on gun control. It was striking because Clinton had spent most of her career advocating for gun control. Yet, to compete against Obama, she dramatically shifted her stance and presented herself as a Second Amendment advocate, who fondly recalled being taught to shoot by her grandfather in Scranton. Now, Clinton has shifted away from talking about learning to shoot a gun to attacking Sanders for refusing to support the Sandy Hook victims in their lawsuit against gun manufacturers. Source: CommonDreams.org column, Shadow Proof, by Kevin Goztola, April 7, 2016. Fact check: 33,000 gun deaths includes suicides and accidents. Hillary Clinton asserted, 90 people a day die from gun violence in our country. That's 33,000 people a year. Is that true? We checked and found that her statement was technically true but misleading. The federal CDC publishes statistics on causes of death for all Americans. Here are the figures from their 2013 update. 21,175 suicide by gun. 11,208 homicide by gun. 505 accidental discharge of firearms. 32,888 total deaths by firearm. So Secretary Clinton is technically correct about her figures. The misleading aspect is that voters interpret death from gun violence as murder. Self-inflicted and accidentally inflicted deaths should not count in a political discussion about restricting firearms, or at least, should be counted differently. Clinton chose to use the misleading statistic because it is more persuasive than saying 11,000 deaths from intentional gun violence against others. We rate Clinton's statement as true but misleading. Source: On the Issues Fact Check on 2016 NBC Democratic Debate, Jan 17, 2016. I support Brady Bill and closing the Charleston loophole. Clinton: I have been for the Brady Bill, I have been against assault weapons. I have voted not to give gun makers and sellers immunity. And I would hope that others would join the Democrats who are trying to close the Charleston loophole. We need to move on this consensus that exists in the country. It's no longer enough just to say the vast majority of Americans want common sense gun safety measures, including gun owners. On the issue's explanation, the Charleston loophole refers to a recent shooter in Charleston, South Carolina, who legally purchased the weapon he used in the shooting because of a default proceed rule. That rule means, if the FBI does not notify the dealer within 3 days, the purchase can proceed. In the case of the Charleston shooter, he was on the FBI list due to previous arrests, but due to a clerical error by a county jail clerk reporting his arrest with the wrong agency, he was allowed to purchase the weapon. Source: 2015 ABC/MUR Democratic Primary Debate in NH, December 19, 2015. Arming more people is not appropriate response to terrorism. O'Malley, Secretary Clinton changes her position on this every election year. When ISIL does videos that say the easiest way to get a combat assault weapon in the US is at a gun show, we should all be waking up. Clinton, guns, in and of themselves, will not make Americans safer. We lose 33,000 people a year already to gun violence, arming more people to do what I think is not the appropriate response to terrorism. The first line of defense against radicalization is in Muslim American community. Source: 2015 ABC/MR Democratic primary debate in NH, December 19, 2015. Reverse gun manufacturer immunity, let them get sued. Q. You say that Senator Sanders took a vote on immunity that you don't like. So if he can be tattooed by a single vote and that ruins all future opinions by him on this issue, why then isn't he right when he says your wrong vote on Iraq tattoos you forever in your judgment? Clinton: I said I made a mistake on Iraq, and I would love to see Senator Sanders join with some of my Senate colleagues in addition the Senate that I see in the audience. Let's reverse the immunity. Let's put the gun makers and sellers on notice that they're not going to get away with it. Sanders: let's do more than reverse the immunity. Q. Was that a mistake, Senator? Sanders: let me hear if there's any difference between the Secretary and myself. I don't know that there's any disagreement here. Source: 2015 CBS Democratic primary debate in Iowa, November 14, 2015. Don't shield gun manufacturers from lawsuits. I vote that way. Q. For a decade, you said that holding gun manufacturers legally responsible for mass shootings is a bad idea. Now, you say you're reconsidering. Which is it, shield the gun companies from lawsuits or not? Sanders: Bernie Sanders has a D- voting rating from the NRA. Back in 1988, I told the gun owners of Vermont that I supported a ban on assault weapons. I have strongly avoided instant background checks, doing away with this terrible gun show loophole. And I think we've got to move aggressively at the federal level. Q. Is Bernie Sanders tough enough on guns? Clinton: No, not at all. We have to look at the fact that we lose 90 people a day from gun violence. This has gone on too long and it's time the entire country stood up against the NRA. The majority of our country supports background checks, and even the majority of gun owners do. Source: 2015 CNN Democratic primary debate in Las Vegas, October 13, 2015. Sensible restraints on manufacturer liability and online sales. I will push hard to get more sensible restraints. I want to work with Congress, but I will also look at ways as president. We must expand background checks for gun shows and online sales, and close the current loophole that negates the need for a background check after a 3-day waiting period. I will also repeal legislation that shields gun manufacturers, distributors and dealers from liability suits, even in cases of mass shootings. Source: Fox News 2015 coverage of 2016 presidential hopefuls, October 5, 2015. Gun control advocates see Clinton as an ally. Gun control advocates see Clinton as an ally who can finish the push for tightened background checks that has stalled in President Obama's second term, The Hill reports. According to Rhode Island Public Radio, as governor, Chafee supported 2013 legislation that would have banned semi-automatic assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. That legislation was watered down significantly before it passed the legislature. Source: Rolling Stone magazine on 2016 presidential hopefuls, June 18, 2015. Rein in idea that anybody can have a gun anywhere, anytime. As Hillary Clinton mulls running for president in 2016, she has been careful to shy away from broad, sweeping policy declarations. But not when she delivered harsh criticism of gun culture in America and denounced the idea that anybody can have a gun, anywhere, at any time. Clinton didn't dispute Americans' right to own guns. But she said access to guns in the US had grown way out of balance. We've got to rein in what has become an almost article of faith that anybody can have a gun anywhere, anytime, she said. And I don't believe that is in the best interest of the vast majority of people. Citing a number of shootings that arose from minor arguments over loud music or texting, she drew a comparison. That's what happens in the countries I've visited where there is no rule of law and no self-control. She added, that is something that we cannot just let go without paying attention. Source: Wall Street Journal, Anywhere, Anytime Gun Culture, May 6, 2014. 2000, Advocate for National Gun Registry, 2008, backed off. Gun rights groups have long considered Mrs. Clinton their foe. Her 2000 Senate campaign centered on a push to keep guns off the streets, and she was a forceful advocate of creating a national gun registry. But 8 years later, as she faced off against then-Senator Barack Obama in the Democratic primary, she positioned herself as more conservative than him on gun control. She backed off the proposal for a national registry and publicly recounted how her father had taught her how to shoot as a little girl, a story that prompted Obama to ask if she was seeking Annie Oakley comparisons. Gun control groups criticized her change in tune, back to strongly supporting gun control, as hypocritical and politically motivated. Her position on gun control puts her at odds with the staunchly pro-gun GOP, and the push for gun control laws at the federal level has been historically unsuccessful. As president, Bill Clinton sought to tighten gun laws but was unable to achieve lasting effects. Source: Wall Street Journal, Anywhere, Anytime Gun Culture, May 6, 2014. Balance lawful gun ownership and keeping guns from criminals. Both you and Senator Obama, in the past, have supported strong gun control measures. But now when I listen to you on the campaign, I hear you emphasizing that you believe in an individual's right to bear arms. Both of you are strong advocates for licensing of guns. Both of you are strong advocates for the registration of guns. Why don't you emphasize that now? Clinton, I respect the Second Amendment. I respect the rights of lawful gun owners to own guns, to use their guns, but I also believe that most lawful gun owners whom I have spoken with for many years across our country also want to be sure that we keep those guns out of the wrong hands. And as president, I will work to try to bridge this divide, which I think has been polarizing and, frankly, doesn't reflect the common sense of the American people. We will strike the right balance to protect the constitutional right but to give people the feeling and the reality that they will be protected from guns in the wrong hands. Source: 2008 Philadelphia Primary Debate, on eve of PA Primary, April 16, 2008. Give local police access to federal gun tracking info. I will be a good partner, for cities like Philadelphia, as president. Because I will bring back the so-called COPS program, where we had 100,000 police on the street, which really helped drive down the crime rate and also helped create better community relations. I will also work to reinstate the assault weapons ban. We had it during the 1990s. It really was an aid to our police officers, who are now once again, because it has lapsed, the Republicans will not reinstate it, are being outgunned on our streets by these military-style weapons. I will also work to make sure that police departments get access to the federal information that will enable them to track illegal guns, because the numbers are astounding. Probably 80% of the guns used in gun crimes got there illegally. And under the Republicans, that information was kept from local law enforcement. Source: 2008 Philadelphia Primary Debate, on eve of PA Primary, April 16, 2008. Let states and cities determine local gun laws. Q. Do you support the DC handgun ban? A. I want to give local communities the authority over determining how to keep their citizens safe. This case you're referring to is before the Supreme Court. Q. But what do you support? A. I support sensible regulation that is consistent with the constitutional right to own and bear arms. Q. Is the DC ban consistent with that right? A. I think a total ban, with no exceptions under any circumstances, might be found by the court not to be. But DC, or anybody else, should be able to come up with sensible regulations to protect their people. Q. But do you still favor licensing and registration of handguns? A. What I favor is what works in NY. We have one set of rules in NYC and a totally different set of rules in the rest of the state. What might work in NYC is certainly not going to work in Montana. So, for the federal government to be having any kind of blanket rules that they're going to try to impose, I think doesn't make sense. Source: 2008 Philadelphia Primary Debate, on eve of PA Primary, April 16, 2008. Against illegal guns, crackdown on illegal gun dealers. I am against illegal guns, and illegal guns are the cause of so much death and injury in our country. I also am a political realist and I understand that the political winds are very powerful against doing enough to try to get guns off the street, get them out of the hands of young people. I don't want the federal government preempting states and cities like New York that have very specific problems. We need to have a registry that really works with good information about people who are felons, people who have been committed to mental institutions. We need to make sure that that information is in a timely manner, both collected and presented. We do need to crack down on illegal gun dealers. This is something that I would like to see more of. We need to enforce the laws that we have on the books. I would also work to reinstate the assault weapons ban. We now have, once again, police deaths going up around the country, and in large measure because bad guys now have assault weapons again. Source: 2008 Democratic Debate in Las Vegas, Jan 15, 2008. Backed off a national licensing registration plan on guns. I believe in the Second Amendment. People have a right to bear arms. But I also believe that we can commonsensically approach this, and backed off a national licensing registration plan. Source: 2008 Democratic Debate in Las Vegas, Jan 15, 2008. Get assault weapons and guns off the street. Q. How would you address gun violence that continues to be the #1 cause of death among African American men? A. I think it's important to remember that the crime rate was driven down, and gun violence was driven down in the 1990s because of a combination of policies, like 100,000 police on the street and getting assault weapons off the street, and because of a growing economy. 22 million new jobs gave people who are hopeless a better chance for a future. So I want to get back to what works. This administration has tried to kill the 100,000 police. You've got mayors whose police force is outgunned by the criminals and the gangbangers. Assault weapons are back on the street. We've got to go and do what works again. In addition to having policies that will get guns off the street, we do have to give young men particularly a better chance of a future that includes educational and economic opportunities and second chances when they get caught up in the criminal justice system. Source: 2007 North W. Camp Presidential Primary Forum, July 12, 2007. Background check system could prevent Virginia Tech massacre. Q. Did any role that federal government plays fail those students at Virginia Tech? A. Yes. You know, I remember very well when I accompanied Bill to Columbine after that massacre and met with the family members of those who had been killed and talked with the students, and feeling that we had to do more to try to keep guns out of the hands of the criminal and of the mentally unstable. And during the Clinton administration, that was a goal not to, in any way, violate people's Second Amendment rights, but to try to limit access to people who should not have guns. Unfortunately, we saw the tragedy unfold at Virginia Tech. We now know that the background check system didn't work, because certainly this shooter, as he's called, had been involuntarily committed as a threat to himself and others. And, yet, he could walk in and buy a gun. Source: 2007 South Carolina Democratic Primary Debate, on MSNBC, April 26, 2007. Fact check: VA Tech shooter not declared a danger to others. Hillary Clinton slipped up in her description of the Virginia Tech killings, overstating what a Virginia court had found about the shooter's mental state in 2005. Clinton said the shooter had been involuntarily committed as a threat to himself and others. And, yet, he could walk in and buy a gun. That's only half true. It's correct that Sue Hewitt Cho had a court-documented history of mental illness that should have precluded his purchase of a firearm. And he was indeed found to present an imminent danger to himself as a result of mental illness in a ruling dated December 14, 2005. But the judge did not check a box that would have declared Cho an imminent danger to others. Moreover, the judge declined to involuntarily commit Cho and sent him to outpatient counseling. Clinton's confusion on this might stem from bad reporting by some news outlets that said Cho was found to be a danger to himself and others. Source: Fact check on 2007 South Carolina Democratic debate, April 26, 2007. Congress failure at Littleton response inspired Senate run. A month after the Columbine shootings, Bill and I went to Littleton, Colorado to visit with the families of victims and survivors. The Columbine tragedy was not the first, nor the last, episode involving gun violence at an American high school. But it ignited the call for more federal action to keep guns out of the hands of the violent, troubled and young, a lethal combination. Bill and I announced a proposal to raise the legal age of handgun ownership to 21, and limit purchases of handguns to one per month. Source: Living History, by Hillary Rodham Clinton, p. 503-4, November 1, 2003. Keep guns away from people who shouldn't have them. We need to stand firm on behalf of sensible gun control legislation. We have to enact laws that will keep guns out of the hand of children and criminals and mentally unbalanced persons. Congress should have acted before our children started going back to school. I realize the NRA is a formidable political group, but I believe the American people are ready to come together as a nation and do whatever it takes to keep guns away from people who shouldn't have them. Source: www.hillary2000.org, Gun Safety, September 9, 2000. Limit access to weapons, look for early warning signs. We have to make sure that our schools are safe. Our schools need more help from parents and from communities, and we also need more social workers and counselors who are trained to see the early warning signs. No school security system or metal detector can keep out the culture of violence that dominates the lives of so many of our children. We have to address issues of culture, and we have to ensure that young people do not have easy access to weapons, not only firearms but bomb-making material. Source: www.hillary2000.org, Safe Schools, September 9, 2000. License and register all handgun sales. Hillary Rodham Clinton offered her support for a legislative proposal to license handguns. The legislation, sponsored by Senator Charles Schumer, would require anyone who wants to purchase a gun to obtain a state-issued photo gun license. I stand in support of this common-sense legislation to license everyone who wishes to purchase a gun, Clinton said. I also believe that every new handgun sale or transfer should be registered in a national registry, such as Chuck is proposing. Source: CNN.com, June 2, 2000. Tough gun control keeps guns out of wrong hands. I think it does once again urge us to think hard about what we can do to make sure that we keep guns out of the hands of children and criminals and mentally unbalanced people. I hope we will come together as a nation and do whatever it takes to keep guns away from people who have no business with them. Source: Press release, July 31, 1999. Gun control protects our children. We will not make progress on a sensible gun control agenda unless the entire American public gets behind it. It is really important for each of you, kids, to make sure you stay away from guns. If you have guns in your home, tell your parents to keep them away from you and your friends and your little brothers and sisters. Source: Forum at Southside Middle School in Nassau County, July 15, 1999. Don't water down sensible gun control legislation. We have to do everything possible to keep guns out of the hands of children, and we need to stand firm on behalf of the sensible gun control legislation that passed the Senate and then was watered down in the House. It does not make sense for us at this point in our history to turn our backs on the reality that there are too many guns and too many children have access to those guns, and we have to act to prevent that. Source: Remarkstania in Orlando, Florida, July 5, 1999. Lock up guns, store ammo separately. If you own a gun, make sure it's locked up and stored without the ammunition. In fact, make it stored where the ammunition is stored separately. We've made some progress in the last several years with the Brady Bill and some of the bans on assault weapons, but we have a lot of work to do. Source: ABC's Good Morning America, June 4, 1999. Ban kids' unsupervised access to guns. Q. What actions can students take to help gun control further? A. Young people, especially teenagers, should pledge to not give any child unsupervised access to a firearm, not to go into homes, or let your younger siblings go into homes where you know guns are and are not safely stored and taken care of. You guys are going to a party, make sure there are no guns around. If you own a gun or you know people who do, make sure it's locked up and stored without the ammunition. Source: ABC's Good Morning America, June 4, 1999. Get weapons off the streets, zero tolerance for weapons. The first step is to take weapons off the streets and to put more police on them. The Brady Bill, which my husband signed into law in 1995, imposes a 5-day waiting period for gun purchases, time enough for authorities to check out the buyer's record and for the buyer to cool down about any conflict he might have intended the gun to resolve. Since it was enacted, more than 40,000 people with criminal records have been prevented from buying guns. The 1994 Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act banned 19 types of military-style assault weapons whose only purpose is to kill people. As part of a zero-tolerance policy for weapons, drugs, and other threats to the safety of teachers and students, the President signed an executive order decreeing that any student who comes to school with a gun will be expelled and punished as a condition of federal aid. Source: It Takes a Village, by Hillary Clinton, p. 126, September 25, 1996. Voted no on prohibiting lawsuits against gun manufacturers. A bill to prohibit civil liability actions from being brought or continued against manufacturers, distributors, dealers, or importers of firearms or ammunition for damages, injunctive or other relief resulting from the misuse of their products by others. Voting yes would exempt lawsuits brought against individuals who knowingly transfer a firearm that will be used to commit a violent or drug trafficking crime. Exempt lawsuits against actions that result in death, physical injury or property damage due solely to a product defect. Call for the dismissal of all qualified civil liability actions pending on the date of enactment by the court in which the action was brought. Prohibit the manufacture, import, sale or delivery of armor-piercing ammunition, and sets a minimum prison term of 15 years for violations. Require all licensed importers, manufacturers and dealers who engage in the transfer of handguns to provide secure gun storage or safety devices. Reference: Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, Bill S. 397, Vote No. 2005-219 on July 29, 2005. Voted no on banning lawsuits against gun manufacturers for gun violence. Vote to pass a bill that would block certain civil lawsuits against manufacturers, distributors, dealers and importers of firearms and ammunition, mainly those lawsuits aimed at making them liable for gun violence. In this bill, trade groups would also be protected. The bill would call for the dismissal of pending lawsuits against the gun industry. The exception would be lawsuits regarding a defect in a weapon or ammunition. It also would provide a 10-year authorization of the assault weapons ban, which is set to expire in September 2004. The bill would increase the penalties for gun-related violent or drug trafficking crimes which have not resulted in death, to a minimum of 15 years imprisonment. The bill calls for criminal background checks on all firearm transactions at gun shows where at least 75 guns are sold. Exemptions would be made available for dealers selling guns from their homes as well as members-only gun swaps and meets carried out by non-profit hunting clubs. Reference: Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, Bill S.1805 H.I.1036, Vote No. 2004-30 on Mar 2, 2004. Prevent unauthorized firearm use with Smart GU.